Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, ask a friend of mine to choose a Doctor Who story. I then watch it, commentate along, drop in facts and observations, and try to guess what my special guest's favourite thing about each instalment might be.
Hi Toby, I'm Iain Key and I've chosen for you The Invisible Enemy. Happy Times and Places.
Well, goodness everybody, it's been a while. There's been a hiatus between episodes 3 and 4 of The Invisible Enemy here in Happy Times and Placesville because, stop me if you want to do if you're already sozzled on the mentions of Quatermass drinking game, but I've launched my book. There will be further mention of Quatermass within this episode, I'm sure, but I've launched my book on the Quatermass experiment, which took me out of podcasting action for a while, and then Doctor Who itself has been on, as I record this just after the broadcast of the weekend broadcast of the Reality War, and I'm sure there will be thoughts and opinions of that, but maybe down the line when it is when I can look back with nostalgia, because that's how I think. That's the best lens for me to look on things. I'm not a current person. That said, I am about to do a Happy Times and Places on a Shooting Gatwa episode, and indeed one from this latest series, because I'm trying to get down with the kids, but not yet, because we're going back to the beginning. My first ever experience of Doctor Who, The Invisible Enemy, which has been chosen, as you heard, by Iain Key. It's so long ago. I think there's a chance that I could do well on this one, but I've been known to blow it all in on the final episode and get nowhere near what my guest chooses. So I'm not going to build up too much, lest we have a disappointing conclusion. I use the phrase disappointing conclusion apropos of nothing, you understand. But let us see what the listeners, the Patreons, have to say about, well, their reaction to episode 3 leading into this episode 4. If you would like to comment and have your thoughts read out, then the way to do that is become a Patreon over at Patreonville, where we have a lovely, lovely time, and I'm very grateful for all the support that I receive there from the likes of Lisa and Andrew, the mighty Lisa and Andrew, who say, we're loving all the love for Michael Sheard. A couple more memories come to mind. We're at a convention. Lisa and Andrew are veteran convention goers. They're icons of the Who world, and they've been around and being near everyone and everything. There's nothing they don't know. There's nobody they haven't met. Movers and shakers, I would say, and very knowledgeable too. A couple more memories come to mind. We were at a convention where Michael found some sausage rolls behind the stage. Being of a generous nature, he proceeded to throw them into the audience. No one worried about a sell-by date, and nobody died. They were probably someone's lunch. One last thing. Michael's favourite memory of this story was fighting with Leela in Doctor Who's brain. Lovely chap, much missed. He certainly was. I love the idea of Michael Sheard throwing sausage rolls out at people. David Gillespie Pratt, Part 3 has a wonderful encapsulation of Doctor Who. The imagination and ambition of a virus embedded in the Doctor's brain, and a miniature clone of the Doctor pops in for a chat, coupled with the realisation with Tom Baker kneeling down talking to a claw sticking out of a black bag. And we love it! Matt Foy says, maybe this one should be called The Immobile Enemy. Bless John Scott Martin being wheeled about by the rest of the cast. Next episode, Riders on the Prawn. Ha ha ha. Adam Parkin, but has replies from Jason Thompson. Adam Parkin says, episode 3 is the one that stuck in my head the most when I saw this as a child in the 90s. I adored the idea of being shrunk and exploring inside a brain and being attacked by antibodies tied in with what I'd been learning at school. Is the whole left side, right side of the brain considered nonsense now? I remember that being something people said, with one side being more creative and the other more logical. The more I write, it all sounds like hogwash. Jason Thompson, who knows his science, pops in and says, if I recall correctly, there are brain functions that are highly lateralized, i.e. located more on one side than the other, such as language, processing certain external stimuli, etc. And this is broadly consistent, but the idea that one side is dominant or that logic and creativity are so divided in terms of personality traits has no support in neurological studies. So the notion that a person is left-brained or right-brained is indeed hogwash. Jason has come back because he says, OK, I looked into it a bit. Apparently this belief grew out of a 1960s neurological study on severely epileptic patients who had had the connection between the left and right hemispheres of their brain severed, a somewhat drastic procedure to control their seizures. Among other experiments, these patients were shown words whilst covering one eye. Patients who saw them with only their right eye could say what they saw. Patients who saw it with only their left eye could not say what they saw, but could draw the word. Language is highly left lateralized, so patients could only form the words to describe what they saw verbally if the stimulus went to that side of their brain, as the optic nerve from the right eye does. In the other case, they could not comprehend or say the word, but could reproduce the form when asked to draw it. That seems to have been extrapolated in popular myth as a logic-creativity dichotomy. Thanks for the really detailed reply, Jason, says Adam. I appreciate you doing the research. As do we all, Jason. I'm positively Reithian. Yes, who needs a sexy influencer standing in the TARDIS BBC feed when you've got this sort of, as I say, Reithian content here in Happy Times and Places Corner. Jason himself says that, but Adam, by the way, mentioning that part 3 is the one that stuck with him. Part 3, I think, is definitely, parts 1 and 3 are definitely the ones that I remember the most. Jason Thompson says, I just remembered that long before I first saw this story, I was familiar with some of the auditory elements thanks to the BBC audio cassette I had of Doctor Who sound effects. The cloning and miniaturization sound and the ambient sound of the inside of the Doctor's brain were on it. I played that cassette to death. That cassette, or LP, was clearly in the possession of a number of animation studios, as I've discovered during my own podcast, Robots in Your Eyes. Excuse the shameless plug. No worries there, Jason. Would you believe that the Sontaran blaster from The Invasion of Time was in Danger Mouse? Or that when the original Transformers cartoon did their own Fantastic Voyage, or Invisible Enemy, that the scenes inside Megatron's body were set to the electronic heartbeat of the Dalek control room? The sonic screwdriver and TARDIS door sounds cropped up more times than I can recount, and even Steyer's collecting robot could be heard once or twice. Even the Japanese Transformers Headmasters cartoon used part of the TARDIS dematerialization sound effect, the whooshy end bit rather than the main wheezy groany bit, when the mighty Fortress Maximus transformed into his colossal robot mode. Doctor Who cropping up in all kinds of unexpected places. I love that, Jason. Thank you. Anthony Carroll, a balmy episode, but fun. Most evil prawn in sci-fi history. And good defence of the lasered wall, Toby. I stuck up for the lasered wall. I did. Shane Play says, I lean in your direction that you and your guest are a draw with your... I lean in your direction that you and your guest are a draw with your favourite pick on this episode. Thank you, Shane. You must... I do need external arbiters sometimes. Ombuds people. The Fantastic Voyage parallels are hard to avoid, yet one thing that occurred to me is that this is probably the only Fantastic Voyage style story where the person went inside their own body, so score 1 for the Doctor. Speaking of brains and mind-brain interfaces and wind blowing through a brain in an enjoyable manner, you have to remember this is a Gallifreyan brain and not a human brain, so the biology and science make perfect sense. End tongue-in-cheek. That's very true, Shane, and that's indeed what Tom Baker would said to get away with any kind of performance. How do you know what I'd do? I'm not from Guildford. I'm a Gallifreyan from the constellation of Castorberus. James Lark. Kylie has embedded herself into the psyche of many, certainly of my generation, but I don't know what it reveals about me that when you said sheared on the pillar, I instantly heard it as an alternative lyric to her 1990 single Tears on My Pillow. I'll take your word for it, James Lark, because that's not a song that springs easily into my synapses. I'm aware it was a cover of a song first recorded in 1958, but I do not believe Little Anthony and the Imperials have embedded themselves into the psyche of any generation, says James, clearing it up, lest he get heckles from any pop experts who hang around these parts. John Hall, John Scott Martin truly goes above and beyond, being encased in that giant prawn outfit under those sweltering studio lights. Allegedly, when first wheeled onto the studio floor, the nucleus was shedding so many filaments of fiberglass that Health and Safety evacuated the studio, leaving the poor guy stranded in his safety hazard. No wonder this was his last non-Dalek operator role in Doctor Who. John Hall adds, one thing that always bugged me, no pun intended, about the Invisible Enemy is the fate of Supervisor Lowe. Part 4, which we're about to see, shows us that the nucleus's prawns, such as Professor Marius, can be cured of their possession. So why doesn't the Doctor try to do the same thing for Lowe? Instead, poor Michael Sheard gets shoved into a storage tank to be devoured by baby nuclei once they hatch from their soccer balls. Yes, it's almost like they've decided, well, he's the baddie, so it's okay that he dies. I suspect in Modern Who you would save him and attempt to have at least most people, if not everybody, living. Nev Fountain says, just to say, I wasn't explaining the phrase hoist by their own petard. I was explaining which particular part of their petards that Bob and Dave like to exploit, i.e. the villain's own tech. Sorry, Nev, if I went off on one about, it's fine. All right, thanks, Nev. Chris Williams says, never mind Sutek sitting on top of the TARDIS all these years. Every Doctor since this has been carrying around tiny Leela's knife in his brain. That's very true. It still gets left there, doesn't it? The story was peak Doctor Who for me as a kid. It looked like how everyone thinks sci-fi looks like, with white walls, great models, creative design and costumes. Adding a robot, and it's a dog to boot, to what was already my favourite show was just the icing on the cake. I can remember watching it, maybe the repeat, and then trying to draw K9 and make him out of cardboard boxes. Talking K9 went on the Christmas list as soon as I saw it, although I did get in trouble for putting his little voice record into my sister's doll and scaring the life out of her when she played with it. Ha ha ha, well done, Chris. Oh yes, and you're spot on with the cracked wall thing. If it had been a remount, they would have at least brushed away the rubble on the floor. They weren't that sloppy. Nev Fountain says, Doctor Who... to be fair, Chris, I don't think people are suggesting it's a remount. I think people are just suggesting that the wall was primed to crack when shot, and you could see the crack where the laser gun cracks it. But I think the point is made that the reason K9 fires at that part of the wall is because it has a crack, and so his laser can get purchase on it. But I think some people have seen it as you know, the crack is too visible. I'm not sure they were suggesting a remount anyway. But anyway, why don't I just say thanks for your support, Chris? Chris was sticking up for me. So thanks, Chris. Nev Fountain, Doctor Who was very easy to play when you were a kid. All you needed was a scarf, a dressing gown, big cardboard box with a yoghurt pot on the top, and a bit of open space to explore. I say this because I remember the Invisible Enemy provided another avenue for play acting. How many young Whovians ended up in hospital and, while stuck in bed, fantasised that just outside those doors, at the end of the ward, Leela and K9 were fighting to the death to protect the patients. Just me then. Ha ha. And Susie Ferguson, always good to hear from Susie. I mean, it's always good to hear from everybody, but Susie sometimes is too self-deprecating about her experience of certain aspects of 2. So I'm always keen to make her feel especially welcome. Hello, Susie. Another story, says Susie, that's brand new to me. But this is exciting, Susie. I'm glad that you're discovering it along with us. But I have been keeping up with you all. Well, this story is not being told in a way I was expecting. When you were a bit down on the first episode, I really couldn't understand why, since it seemed to be exactly in your wheelhouse. But after the last 2 eps, I get it. Each episode is so different, which seems so unusual, yet it's really kept me interested. This episode in particular gave me strong Into the Dalek vibes. Honestly, the more old Who I watch, the more recycled, refurbished ideas I spot in new Who. Looking forward to what direction the last episode takes. Well, I'm sorry you've had to wait, Susie. But, well, I think you should wait no more. So let's get ready. I am going to fire it up on the iPlayer. We are belatedly, and apologies for that, going to fire up one more instalment of my first ever Doctor Who story, The Invisible Enemy, in 3, 2, 1. I'm quite looking forward to this because, I'm just looking forward to reconnecting with old Doctor Who, because the headline news this weekend, as I record this, is all about the current iteration, but which is a world of uncertainty and polarised opinions. And people have polarised opinions about Old Who, and The Invisible Enemy is generally not seen as a high point of season 15, and I go with the crowd with this, but nobody gets too bothered. I don't think anyone worries. Although I do recall that this is kind of seen tonally as a move away from Hinchcliffe and towards Graham Williams. The fact that it's odd though, because yes, Frederick Jaeger's putting on a funny accent, but Dennis Lill hasn't. Well, but Dennis Lill isn't putting on a comedy accent. Now, it may be that you're not wild about Dennis Lill's accent in Image of the Fendal. I actually don't think it's bad, because I think it suggests a sort of European who's been hanging around in America. But I think I was going to say that, yes, no, so I stand by that. Jaeger's could be, belonging in the same universe as Louis Fyander's accent in Nightmare of Eden. It's closer to that, I think, than it is to what Lill might be doing in Image of the Fendal, and it's certainly closer to Tristan Nightmare of Eden than it is to Jaeger's own Sorensen in Planet of Evil. And I always wondered why they called it a giant prawn. Contact has been made. See, he's not doing. It's not, but that's not comedic. But he has to maintain. Well, that will have been a choice. They will have had to think about that, because if you're an actor who's used to doing RP, you could drop the accent, as with the comedians, for example, in The Faceless Ones, where it gives away that they are under the thrall of the aliens, because Jamie and Crossland both lose their Scottish accents. So one of the comedians' shortcomings is that they can't do a Scottish accent. So Mike Myers is a comedian. But I wonder if Jaeger toyed with the idea of dropping the accent in order to suggest possession, because of course in those days, it's very much that, RP English was seen as the default, even in the acting profession, Anyway, here's the prawn. I always wondered why people called it a prawn, because I'd remembered the nucleus in part 3. I didn't really particularly remember this. It is quite like a prawn, but I mean, modern Doctor Who has space rhinos, space birds, space cats. So I think a space prawn is not particularly a problem. Is it? Oh, so she's. It's quite interesting that the makeup of the Baal people. So right, yeah. So sorry, Leela is disguising herself in order to gain access. So right, anyway, here we have the prawn being sort of, but I think that's actually not too ineffective. It's we have the Alpha Centauri trick, don't we, of it's a two-armed actor whose arms are attached by fishing wire to the lower arms, but I think that's okay. And I like the colour. I like the sort of crustacean colour. Seeing as the colour of monsters is green, and we have monsters of sort of generally of a darker hue, I'm rather enjoying the fact that it has this pinky and this the sort of transparent exoskeleton. I think that's an attempt to do something a little bit different. It is a bit like a prawn, but what's to say that aliens won't look like prawns? I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people think. I think it's a brave attempt to do something that isn't a blob. In fact, I'd rather have the prawn than a sort of video effect like the antimatter from Green Death or something, which I think brings loads of compromises in terms of where the actors are looking and how it Polax, how it marries with the picture. Oh God, it's weird because I'm so used to seeing Tom Baker talking to K9, but he's lovely. He's quite charmed by him here. He's obviously not fed up with having to get down on his knees. Now that's always a funny thing, isn't it? What's that black represent when it goes out? I was listening to somebody talking about this earlier today about what what happens when you go in through the police box doors and then the bigger doors, and is there something in between? And sometimes they make an attempt to show what's outside, but they didn't bother. It's like it's crossing into a void or something. So that's already we're seeing one of the shortcomings of K9 is that if you actually want to be zapped by him, you have to sort of kneel down and get to his level for the laser beam to come out at an angle that doesn't look ridiculous. Not that always happens. So Susie Ferguson mentioned, well, a couple of people mentioned, and I hadn't really appreciated this, that each episode of this has been rather different, and this one does that thing of going back to the scene of the crime. So we're going back to where the story started 4 weeks ago, so pacing wise, it feels like we're being taken to a conclusion, and structurally. And it does. I actually quite like the ambition of that when Doctor Who is often, let's make as much of the action take place in a few small rooms in the same place, and I appreciate that, and I like the economy and ingenuity of making drama out of limited resources. Bob Baker and Dave Martin have gone, no, to hell with that. We're gonna go all over the place. Now I still wrestle with whether Bob Baker and Dave Martin's cavalier attitude to the possibilities of Doctor Who is a good thing or a bad thing. Younger me would be... I mean, I do think one of your responsibilities as a television writer is knowing that you're writing something that the production that you're writing for can carry off successfully. I think completely disregarding that is... You don't only have one job, but it is one of the jobs that you have. Although I like this shot. I love the lighting in this spaceship. And that high angle that reminds us of what it was like in episode 1. This echoes episode 1 so much in the way that it's shot, but I really like the lighting in that ship. That was very good. And so, I mean, it's amazing how a shot like that, which required locking off a camera, moving an actor, and it was always a compromise because you would never have the actor in exactly the same position. And it's stuff that viewers just had to sort of take in their stride and go, well, we kind of know how this is done, and we know what they sort of mean, but there is a jar because the actor can't stay in exactly the same place. And it's amazing how those sorts of things that were so much part of the language of television, the grammar of television that we just sort of put up with, if we were so inclined, is now not an issue. And they were sort of insuperable when I was a kid. But yes, Bob Baker and Dave Martin, I do think that their ambition, should we say, is it ambition or is it folly? I think as a self-conscious younger fan, it was very important to me that Doctor Who didn't look rubbish. But actually, not as a kid when I watched this, only when I was a teenager and wanting people to like Doctor Who. So actually, I don't think when I was watching this as a kid, there was no compromise at all. I was watching Doctor Who and it was really exciting. So I can't. I mean, I would probably watch this now with a modern viewer who would guffaw at everything, and I would go, what's your problem? I actually think the nucleus is pretty cool. I really like his arms. Yeah, I'm not arguing with the nucleus. And I like all this medical stuff. There is a bit of kind of... I always think it's a problem if one of your characters is going, oh, come on, this is boring. J'accuse whatever Chris Chibnall, the second part of Chris Chibnall's Silurian two-parter, where they're all sitting around a table and even they're bored, going, oh, I'll let you have a space fridge if you let me have the Sahara Desert. I never think it's quite... And what Wheel in Space Part 1, where it's so tedious, the regulars actually go to bed. But I suppose you have to have a realistic passage of time in order to, get the tricky thing done. There's always something going on with the energy of Tom Baker. If he's engaging, I mean, he's slightly detached from Leela here, but he does, when it's important, shoot her a kind of look. but he's not looking. I was just thinking that, saying that, and he was. Then he didn't look at her at all. He's just looked at her now. But it is an interesting dynamic. It's two actors who, even though I think Tom is occasionally very pesky and quite selfish, and later on gets a bit wayward and out of control, which I have to acknowledge about Tom's later period. He's not quite doing it here. He's always compelling. He's always doing something that commands your attention, even if he's not always up. But he did engage with her then, but he also didn't look at her. I think it's a dynamic that kind of works. And look at these. Look, Scott Martin, McManus, Gorman and Sheard. Legends all gone now. We're going to borrow K9. And yes, I mean, it's really weird to think, isn't he, that in another sliding doors universe, K9 would have just been that one-off thing, and I wonder what we'd talk about. I go, I wonder if it would have been cool if K9 had stayed with the Doctor. And of course they do that thing of we see him walk towards the TARDIS, but we don't see him go in, and we just assume that it'll happen. I quite like that. That to me is as effective as saying the TARDIS has a ramp now that we'll never see anybody use, because anybody that needs to use that ramp would automatically be killed as soon as they entered the TARDIS, because it hasn't got any railings or not adequate railings for a wheelchair user. Now, for a long time, this shot was supposed to apparently be for an effect shot from an abandoned remake of Quatermass 2. And you can see why people might think that, because Quatermass 2 is about a sort of gestalt alien creature bubbling away inside a dome, an industrial dome, and there is a shot not dissimilar to that in Quatermass 2 in the TV version and the film. Not quite so egg-likey things, but it's not unlike Alien, is it? But it's all gorgeous. It's a nice shot, and it's also because there was a remake shot of the thing in Quatermass 2. I've talked to Richard Bignell about this, and we need to get to the bottom of it, because we haven't quite. Is that for a television programme, apparently, the BBC Visual Effects Department and some of the Doctor Who guys did build a recreation of the tank in Quatermass 2 for a programme, I think, called, shot Pat Gorman in the knee, and then he has to shoot him in the shoulder. I mean, it's a bit tortuous, isn't it? But Pat Gorman acquitted himself well then, getting shot about 9 times. Developing a resistance radiation. So there's a reason for it, and they carried it off okay. But so yes, there's the mystery of this, because it was a program, I think, whatever it was called, Those Were the Days or something, which that supposedly had a shot a bit like this. But we've never actually worked out what that program was, or if it was ever made. So why they did this remade shot of the tank in Quatermass 2, which isn't the same as the shot of the things in The Invisible Enemy, but for many years was rumoured to be so. So if you didn't know that there was a rumour that the effect shot in this was from a proposed remake of Quatermass 2, or indeed from the Those Were the Days, which is a programme we've never found, none of it's true anyway. But anyway, there we are. There's some backstory to something that never happened, but we kind of thought, kind of had, but didn't. It was one of those things that was sort of mentioned in articles here and there, so became part of the sort of whispered history of Doctor Who that turned out not to be true. And the history of the series is littered with stuff like that. And I'm trying to think of some other examples now, and now I can't. Oh, I think probably various story titles which were applied to certain stories they never actually belonged to, and that sort of thing. It's a lovely shot. I love a model. Now that wasn't great though, was it? Because the zap that Sheard did to Baker to shoot the stuff out of his hands actually happened off screen. We heard the zap while we had a close up of the model, so maybe that shot didn't work. Or anyway, it's a slight lapse in the direction. But I do like the model shot. and it is a bit reminiscent of Quatermass 2, about which I am currently writing a book, which will hopefully be out next year. So this is the bit that was being referred to. And again, there's a sort of strange cutaway where we don't have the Doctor shutting the door. So one gets a slight sense of a compromised production. But the Doctor dragging K9 along because his batteries have run out. But yeah, I think this has a feel. I like the fact we've come away from the Bial and we're back here. I like this environment with its sort of industrial stuff and its slightly darker lighting. And as I say, it feels like returning for unfinished business from the first episode. And poor old Brian Grelis has been hanging around there. And and Leela's just stabbed him in the neck. Good Lord. And of course, Safran would have also been free of free of the nucleus in about 10 minutes' time. K9 being out of juice is, of course, something that will beset the thing from here on in. But it's interesting to see it sort of flagged up in his very first story, because of course sometimes they have to write him out for practical reasons. But it's interesting to note it's part of the character in a story he was actually designed to be in. Now it's interesting that oxygen is spelt correctly and it's not spelt OCKSEYJEN. I don't think it was anyway. I think it was spelt normally. And you don't see many things of this yellow colour in Doctor Who, so I'm enjoying the slightly different colour palette of this particular environment that this final episode takes place in. And now Doctor Who's going to blow everything up. So it's a funny old beast, this, isn't it? But it's an attempt to do proper sci-fi, and I mean, you know, I remember the Space 1999 and Buck Rogers and all those things that were, I know later, Buck Rogers much later than this, but it all part of my childhood, and those programs did slightly more spacey things than Doctor Who tended to do. And whilst I preferred Doctor Who because I think I preferred its sensibility and its sense of fun and its characters, I did yearn that Doctor Who would be able to do some of the more sort of spacey stuff that those other programs, because I didn't realise at the time, but because they had higher budgets, I think were able to do and to aim for. That's a silly gag, but it works okay. And you know, it's quite a complex shot to pull off just for the sake of a silly gag. But I applaud their ambition. But it just goes to show that there's an attitude towards, if somebody goes, wouldn't it be witty if, and people going, yeah, all right, let's do that joke. So and I think the prawn looks all right in there. I mean, you'd want his eyes to be a little bit, although prawn's eyes are quite dead. Or no, maybe they only are when we see them. Oh dear. I used to love her. I don't eat fish anymore. I used to be my favourite, but I saw a documentary about an octopus, and we've taken fish out of our diets as well now. As I get older, I get more sentimental. Anyway, I'm never quite convinced by the flame on that effect shot. Flames always look a bit too overgrown, don't they? You don't have flames the right size of flame, because the flames would be small. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But flames always look slightly out of proportion on effect shots from this period. But nonetheless, those effects were very, very good. I love a TARDIS spinning in space shot, and I used to think of them as quite regular occurrences in the show, because there's so many in season 18, which is a big memory of mine. And it was only when you actually watch the show all the way through that they're not actually as common as you might think. But I do love a TARDIS spinning through space. And of course, we have the thing. It also happened with Jamie, didn't it? That they filmed a scene where he didn't stay. Is that true now, or is this one of those those myths that they didn't that they recorded two different endings. I can't remember. Anyway, as you know, they take him with him, but I'm sure it was written up that originally they filmed a scene where K9 was left behind, but maybe that was the intention. I can't remember. This isn't too much information, and I'm doubting myself. No, I'm pretty sure they filmed without, and then they filmed with, or they were going to film anyway. But of course, as it doesn't matter, as we know, the original plan was that K9 would stay behind. He wasn't written to join the TARDIS and facilitate that terrible joke, which is again a kind of nod. I can't imagine a Hinchcliffe story ending with a scientist with a funny German accent doing a terrible gag, and especially as TARDIS is not something that Professor Marius is particularly au fait with anyway, to the extent that he's doing gags about it straight away. It's a terrible joke. Anyway, it's a sign of the tone shifting in Doctor Who Towers. But that is The Invisible Enemy, my first Doctor Who story, directed by a director that never directed before or since, but designed by a designer who'd worked on the early years of the show, featuring two actors that I did Guardian obituaries for, Frederick Yeager and Michael Sheard, and many actors I've had the pleasure of meeting: Michael Sheard, John Scott Martin. Not so many, but Jim McManus I never met, but I saw him on stage. Roderick Smith I have seen on stage. An interesting bunch. Brian Grelis I spoke to on the phone, but never quite sorted out. Anyway, it isn't about me. Well, I mean, it kind of is. I'm making it about me because it's my first Doctor Who story. But what am I to? Well, I have to have a favourite thing from episode 5, and I also have to have a favourite thing about the whole story. Let me have a ponder. So, to recap, episode 1 I won because we both chose those marvellous model effects that are, I think, as good as those kind of effects get in the show. I think they're certainly a quality trademark of the Invisible Enemy. If somebody said Invisible Enemy, choose something good from the Invisible Enemy off the top of your head, I would choose those space shots. So that was a no-brainer. The second episode, Iain won because I think didn't he choose the catchphrase as "contact has been established," which I should have chosen to give my Quatermass book another plug, because the first episode of the Quatermass experiment is called "Contact has been established," and "contact has been made." The catchphrase in Invisible Enemy is pretty close, but Iain got a point for that. And then it seems to have been decided. The feedback from patrons seems to be that we've got a sort of score draw, with us both choosing the fantasy voyage inside the Doctor's brain bit. Iain chose the concept, I chose the design. I mean, I think that is being generous to me, because it's obviously the headline of the episode. In fact, it's probably the headline of the story. I think, well, I don't know. It's interesting, isn't it? For a story that we don't, that gets sort of rather glossed over, I think sometimes. It's got lots of headlines. Brilliant model work, fantasy voyage inside the Doctor's brain, and as Shane Play said, it's, all bets are off rules wise, because it is a Time Lord brain, not a human brain. And the debut of K9. So for a story that isn't talked about that much, there's a lot to to sort of bring it out from the herd, really, to separate it from the pack. But anyway, episode 4 brings us. I mean, I can't choose the fact. I can't. Well, let's choose a thing from episode 4. I mean, for episode 4, I think there's the fact that it returns to the scene of the crime. I do like that. I do like the fact that the story is bookended, because whenever the story starts and I think of it set on the Baal Foundation. I think of the White Corridors. So the first episode always seems rather novel and new to me and refreshing, because, oh yeah, it's set in this place that we don't see again. And then you go, now we're at the Baal place. Yeah, this is where it is. And they go inside the Doctor's brain. And then I always get a bit surprised when we go back to the initial setting for episode 4. So it always slightly surprises me, which is weird, seeing as it's a story that I'm familiar with in so many ways. But and of course Doctor Who wasn't designed for rewatch or to surprise you on rewatch, but I always appreciate a story that for some reason, and I don't know if this is good or bad, has bits that make me forget that they happen until I watch them again. And then, of course, I go, well, I know that they happen, but why do I not think of that when I think of it? And I don't. And it's always a bit of a surprise. And I like that because because with Doctor Who, it's very easy to get over familiar with stuff we've watched over and over again. I always do feel that The Invisible Enemy has elements that slightly surprise me. So it could be that. I actually was very pleasantly surprised by the prawn, and I could give him a vote just for the fact that he's a different colour from most Doctor Who monsters, and he is a bit sort of pinky, see-through, crustacean-y colour, which I rather like, the sort of translucent exoskeleton business going on. And I think John Scott Martin does his best. I love, of course, the special effects shot that gives me a chance to talk about Quatermass 2 and plug my next book well in advance, especially if it takes us anything like as long as the last one did to come out. But yes, Quatermass 2 and the urban legend about that. But I do think it's a lovely effect shot, but it's more than a lovely effect shot because it does have that funny mythology surrounds it and that weird connection, although it turns out not to be a connection at all, with Quatermass 2. So that's quite a personal one as well. And of course, I could also choose the fact that and of course, I've got to choose something for episode 4, and I've got to choose something that is a bonus, and I could just throw this away and go, well, I'll choose the bonus, the fact that this is my first story. This is where the journey began. This is where the legend begins. But I could actually win this, so bugger that. So I think I'm going to choose, I like the effect shot, the Quatermass 2 effect shot of the creatures propagating inside the dome, as it were. And I think I'm going to choose for the main thing, I think the fact that the story moves about, that the story has all those different locations. I think that's a really good part of the story, and that Bob Baker and Dave Martin go, let's make this as close to a sort of space adventure-y that makes it a bit like those American shows that I sort of wanted Doctor Who to aspire to be like in terms of size and scope. I mean, I always found them a little less fun. They didn't chime with my sensibility because obviously I'm the sense of humor and the phraseology and everything of British stuff always sat more comfortably with me and chimed better with me, if you like. So I never felt quite the kinship with American sci-fi, although I appreciate it much more now. Although I think Doctor Who is much more interesting than the American sci-fi of the 70s. I think Doctor Who is much more interesting than that. Anyway, listen up. Yeah, so my thing for episode 4 is the bubbly shot, the model shot. And my thing for the whole thing is the fact that it has it goes on such a journey and isn't afraid to transport us from one place to another. Each episode takes place in a different location, even though the last episode takes place in the location of the first episode. But I think that bookends the whole story rather nicely. And so much more time is spent on Titan than I remembered. And actually, I do rather like the sets there as well. I like that yellow door, and I like Lowe's office with the window onto the planet surface and all that. I think that's nice design from Barry Newbury, even though it's obviously quite small and it's quite restricted. I think there's a lot of different texture and color, and I love that lighting in the spaceship when they were coming back over. So yeah, I think the hopping about nature of the story. Let us see if I'm anywhere near. I always do. I get quite close, and then I'm either massively wide of the mark, or I initially choose something and then don't choose it, and then that's what the person chooses. So, Happy Times and Places, episode 4. Iain Key says episode 4. That's this one here. So what is my friend Iain Key, who, like me, has a book out recently. So he's IAINKEY. So support his endeavours. His is an oral history of The Clash, and he's a good man, Ian, and he's a very good friend. His best friend is an actor friend of mine, well, an actor friend of both of ours, Liam Fox, and I owe Foxy a lot, and he's a thoroughly decent man, and he's just finished a year-long tour as Grandpa Potts in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I saw Foxy the other day, and I know that Ian and he have caught up, and I'm going to catch up with Foxy soon, but I have been busy. He finished basically the day before my book launch, so going to catch up with Foxy soon. But he's a lovely actor, Liam Foxy. He is actually in a Big Finish. Finally managed. I think I helped with that, and it finally happened, which is good. So that's nothing compared to how Foxy has helped me. So more than happy to do that. Anyway, I'm doing all of this just to load up Iain Key's video, which is telling me what his favourite thing about episode 4 is, and I hope you. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it will be the special. The more I say it, the less convinced I am it's going to be the case. It's going to be the special effects shot of the eggy things. That's a bit like the special effect. I mean, it's not even that like the special effects shot in Quatermass 2, because it's an amorphous glob really in Quatermass 2, not lots of eggy things. But there is a kind of coming together of lots of different individual things to create a giant hole in Quatermass 2. So you could see why it might work. It's a bit like Alien, though, as well, isn't it, with all the eggs? So it's like Alien and Quatermass 2, which are two brilliant things. Here's Iain Key, now going to choose something different, like a hat.
So episode 4, one thing I really do like about the Invisible Enemy is it just goes around everywhere, and as I mentioned before, there's no lacking in imagination for the story. Louise Jameson completely rocks the green PVC look in this episode. And one thing I like about this episode as well is the use of the TARDIS during the episode as a tool, so it's not just something to arrive and then depart at the end of the story. One of my great thrills, this is going to make me so really sad, one of my thrills as a child or a youngster reading the Doctor Who Target novelisations was actually seeing the word TARDIS in capital letters flicking through the books. And I don't know, there's just something so magical about that. But yeah, using the TARDIS within the episode. It's interesting that Graham Williams had just taken over as producer, who was more used to procedural type stories because he was doing, I think, his Z cards before Doctor Who. And there's a big part of this story as well, which is a hospital procedural almost, which takes place before the Doctor and Leela then go back to Titan Base to deal with the enemy. My favourite thing though about this episode is the scene where the Doctor races to the TARDIS and it starts to dematerialise and then realises that Leela and K9 are still waiting for him to turn up. The bonus thing.
Oh, he's left me on a cliffhanger there. So yeah, he's singled out the thing I didn't mention in my summary at all is the joke. One thing I started talking when Leela, he mentions there Leela rocking the green PVC, was that she was putting makeup on her face, and I started to go, oh, the makeup of the Bial nurses is not unlike the crusty face of those taken over by the nucleus now. And I'm not sure, maybe because I've not watched it in such good quality or such close up before, or I just haven't paid attention to that, or I've just forgotten because I'm getting old. Was Leela doing makeup? Is that because all of the other nurses have a sort of makeup effect like the people in Warriors Gate do and all that sort of thing on her face? Or is she putting makeup on to make it look like she's been overtaken in order to get closer? I'm thinking maybe now it's the latter, and she's just raided some poor nurse's makeup drawer in order to do that. Or because I don't think the nurses have, or maybe they do. So anyway, there's something that I've noticed this time around that I may have noticed before and have simply forgotten about. But it's great that there's a little detail there that's piqued my curiosity. That means I will probably go and look at the camera script, and I will have that in mind next time I watch it, or it'll just give me something to go to bed thinking about. So that's why Doctor Who repays revisit after revisit. Now, I did not get the same thing as Ian. So, 1 to me, 1 to him, score draw, 2 to him. So, this is to see if I can do a tiebreaker. Surely I deserve a tiebreaker for my first ever Doctor Who story. I'm not confident. Let's see what Ian's chosen for his bonus thing.
The bonus thing would have to be K9. Not necessarily K9 itself, but it was the first. Obviously, it was the first story I saw where there was a new companion join the Doctor and the TARDIS crew, and that was always a little bit special when that happened. But yeah, I would say K9 as my fifth and final thing about this story. This is Shadow, by the way. She likes the camera.
For those of you watching on audio, Shadow is a beautiful black cat with stunning eyes. She could very much be a key player should there be a remake of Survival. Beautiful, and she was all over it. She was sitting on Ian's shoulder and everything. And yes, was very much enjoying looking into the camera. Bernard the dog is a little bit camera shy, actually. He doesn't like it if you make him pose for photos. He gets very... A moving camera is slightly different, but he's not wild. Anyway, let's not get into that. Now, how do we score this? Because I actually do get a point for that because I chose K9 in episode 2. So I didn't get a point for episode 2, but I do, because I chose that first, K9, I do get the point for it this time. So that means Ian got the point. I got the points in episode 1. Ian got the points in episode 2. Score draw in episode 3. Ian got the points for episode 4. I get the points for the bonus thing. So that's 2 to Ian, 2 to me. And it depends how you, as a viewer, as a listener, choose to count the score draw. Is it null and void, which means that we get 2 each, which means that we're on a draw, or is, because episode 3 I chose an aspect of the Fantastic Voyage and Ian chose an aspect of the Fantastic Voyage, mean that actually we chose the same thing, which would, in the rules of Happy Times and Places, be a score to me, which means I might win it. Well, I think as it's my first Doctor Who story ever and that it doesn't matter a jot, I am going to say yes. I have, as is appropriate, I have won this round, this edition of Happy Times and Places. The Invisible Enemy. That's another thing. When I think of the Invisible Enemy, I think it's on the back cover blurb of Planet of the Daleks. It talks about one of the Spyrodons moving a thing, and it says in brackets, it was the invisible enemy. And you go, oh, is that a thing? But it's not the same as the invisible enemy, but it's obviously a phrase in common parlance in sort of Doctor Who-ness. But yes, that's a weird connection between Planet of the Daleks and the invisible enemy that is otherwise would be non-existent, but for that back cover blurb, which occasionally enters into my head at random moments like this one. So anyway, yes, this is my first Doctor Who story. I'm never quite going to be able to be objective about it. I'm never quite going to be able to talk about it without that really important element to it that is so personal to me. And so as a result, I'm going to be uncharacteristically generous to myself and say, and lovely. I feel a kinship with Ian. He's a good chap, and we're united by our friendship with Foxy. So that means we're sort of in touch. And Ian's very generous and kind to me as well. He sends me stuff that I might have missed in the newspapers and things featuring either myself and Shez. So I'm very fond of Ian and very grateful to him. And he's also one of the first people to sign up to Patreon as well. Good man. So thank you, Ian, and I think you've secured me a little bit of a victory. But if you want it to be a joint victory, Ian, I'll take that as well. Seeing as Ian and I have both been published in recent times, Ian's book on The Clash, my book on the Quatermass experiment. That's all your bases covered. So yes, I'm happy to be unified. I'm happy for Ian to be in my side, my brain, and me to be inside his. So that was fun. A trip down memory lane. And it's, as I say, it's a story that will always slightly surprise me, which is weird because you would think as my first one it would be one that is so familiar, but I think because some of my memories of it are still memories of that very first time, and so they're not quite exact, although I talked about them there, certain camera angles and certain shots I was pretty familiar with. But I actually like the fact that they reside there as memories, and that those memories haven't been erased by a sort of over familiarity with the televised episode, if that makes sense. I've still got those memories from when they hatched, and I quite like that. That's perhaps something to do with the different parts of my brain operating in different ways. Perhaps they're being kept apart by those gusts of wind. Anyway, you always remember your first time, and that was my first time. Sometimes it can be painful, sometimes it can be embarrassing, but nobody can ever ever take it away from you. And for me, my first time will always be a happy time and place. Take care. Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Iain Key, who can be found on Twitter at Iain Key, IAINKEY. And do get his book about the Clash, All the Young Punks, which is published by Spenwood Books. I'm grateful to Iain and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Ruben Herfindahl, Stephen Moffat, Peter Burns, James Corey-Smith, Peter Harness, Ronald Hayden, Rob Leonard, Christopher Meredith, Gavin McLean, Richard Straw, Neil Tate, Nick Tedston, Tim Arding, Nigel Bromley, Paul Cook, Richard Chalk, Peter Chamberlain, Grant Davidson, John Deere, Chris Dunford-Kelk, Paul Dunn, El Pandras, Susie Ferguson, Jason Gorman, Paul Harris, Chris Hyam, Iain Key, Ashley Knight, Joe Llewellyn, Philip Marsh, Nathan Martin, Roland Moore, Rick Moran, Kevin Murdoch, Graham Knott, Adam Parker, Barry Platt, Risto Matti Sorillo and Frank Shales. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. And if you would like to join that list of names, then go to patreon.com/Toby Haydock, and you can become one of that lovely gang who also get to comment along the episodes. You heard their thoughts there, and it's a really positive and nice place to be. And a few people have commented recently that with all the cut and thrust and madness of Doctor Who on the internet, it's sort of quite chilled out and friendly, and everyone's there just to be like Chucky, just to be terribly nice to each other. Which means when entropy hits the universe, we're all doomed, and I'm staying away from grandfather clocks. Anyway, that's a different story. Also, as well as supporting me by the various means that self-employed artists are currently sustained, which is as well as Patreon, also Ko-fi, kofi.com/Toby Haydock, and through getting everything via Spotify or Patreon or iTunes, and supporting online with if not financially, with 5-star reviews and likes and subscribes and thumbs ups and all of that. You can also buy my book, The Quatermass Experiment, which is available now from 10 Acre Films, directly from their website, 10 Acre Films. It's not on Amazon. Please go straight to their website and get it there, and it will be dispatched to you. And I'm really proud of it. It's had a second reprint, and the second reprint has got rid of some of those annoying typos that for some reason crept through, even though we'd gone through it with a fine tooth comb. Anyway, please buy The Quatermass Experiment. It is linked in a way to The Invisible Enemy, and there's even if you don't know anything about Quatermass, there are lots of links between Quatermass and Doctor Who, and it's the birth of TV science fiction. I'm on social media at Haydock Podcasts and at Toby Haydock on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. I'm also on Blue Sky because I'm just a social media whore, and I'm on Instagram at Toby Haydock, and I have a YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe to that. So there we go, The Invisible Enemy, my first ever one. Well, yes, as I record this, is that the last episode of Doctor Who? I mean, when you're listening to this, if you're not a patron, we might know, but I'm recording this on Monday the 2nd of June, so it's about 48 hours after Billy Piper burst onto our screens in Doctor Who, not for the first time, but certainly for the first time like that. And it's funny looking back at something I first saw 40 odd years ago. Obviously I'm a Doctor Who fan, and I will still be doing all things Doctor Who, in my bath chair. So I'm intrigued as to how we will look back on what happened this weekend, and what history will how this episode and certain events within it will be treated by history and by nostalgia and by hindsight and by, of course, all the things that happen after it that may not even be afoot right now, but that will make it mean different things to different people. It's extraordinary the way that this show unfolds, and that our attitudes towards different bits of it change. at the moment, I'm a bit shell shocked and obviously uncertain about the show's future. We can't deny that. This is a corner of the internet that accentuates the positive, and I always try not to let Doctor Who be the cause of any angst or anger in me, because I spent too much time being cross with the thing I love, and it's taken me a great deal of time and therapy to actually try and embrace and spread and be involved in and engage in positivity, and I feel much better for it. But I also do like getting really cross with Doctor Who and worrying about the things that it's done. I've been through all of that, as I always am when Doctor Who is new. I didn't when I first watched The Invisible Enemy because I was young and innocent and perhaps probably better. And then, of course, when I looked back on it later on as I was older, it was a source of embarrassment to me, but I still didn't have I didn't mind because it was my first story. But yeah, I do feel differently about pretty much every Doctor Who story that I had an opinion on, which was all of them 20 years ago. I probably have a slightly different opinion on now, and in fact, I feel much, I'm much happier in and much more relaxed about everything to do with Doctor Who. Actually, I think. Except for new Doctor Who, maybe, because the stakes are higher. Old Doctor Who, nothing that it does is going to affect the future of the show. I'm not worried about the opinions of people who might watch it and think it's old-fashioned. That's just because they don't understand how old telly works. And actually, I've realised as I get older, a lot of people who have opinions are idiots anyway. And even if they're not idiots, it doesn't matter what their opinions are. It only matters if I like it, it's fine. Although no, I still do get annoyed if people don't like something that's good. Do I? I don't know. No, I'm chilled. I'm fine. What am I talking about? It's Doctor Who. What do you do? What do you do? I think Doctor Who, it provokes us, doesn't it? It makes us ponder. It makes us think. It makes us. Sometimes it makes us cross. But this was the beginning of the journey, and it's a journey I'm still on, and it's a journey I'm happy to be on. Sometimes it's a rocky one. Sometimes it goes off in funny directions, and sometimes, but I don't know. You always seem to get there in the end, and it's taken me into the orbit of some very lovely people, and that's the main thing. And that includes people who listen to this and say nice things back. It's nice, isn't it? It's nice. Yeah, it unites us all, and I think that's gives it. Yeah, it's good. It's good to have a common interest and to share your joy of something, or sometimes your lack of joy with it, with other people. But anyway, I'm sure there will be a happy times and places on the reality war sometime in the future. But I think I need to work out what I think first. But I am doing the well very, very shortly to prove that I'm no coward. Anyway, that's your post credits bit, which is sort of hot off the press. Go. Yeah, anyway, good. Back to where it all began. Possibly rounding off my back to where it all began with where it all finished. Is that it? Who knows? As I record this, it could go either way. 3-4 weeks ago, I was convinced it was probably finished, just from what I was hearing and what I felt the atmosphere surrounding the show seemed to be. Talked to a few people since, and now I wouldn't be surprised if it did come back in 2027, as some people are saying. 50-50. Who knows? The left side of my brain says one thing, the right side of my brain says the other.